Welcome to Bucklesberry Lemonade Podcast.
Hey, you said you were going to ask me questions.
That's where you just say hello. This is gonna be a shit show.
It's gonna be a shit show from hell.
All right,
Hello
Mama.
there.
Thank you for being on the show with us. If you don't mind, let's just jump right in. And the first thing, let's talk about. Tell us about some of your spooky experiences growing up. You can just start with whatever story you'd like to start with.
Well, the first time I ever saw something, I was probably about 10 years old. I lived with my grandpa and grandmammy and other cousins. And my grandmammy had been sick, and my grandpa would come wake me up before school and get me help cook breakfast. But one morning he didn't call me, and so when I woke up, I sat on the side of the bed and I was stretching, and I happened to look down at the foot of my bed, and there was a little woman there. She couldn't have been over 2 feet tall. She had on a white bonnet, a black long dress, and a white apron. Well, I thought maybe it was just me dreaming or the cover a certain way. I looked back again, and she was still there, and I run out of the room. And my grandmama was up to the stove cooking. She was all well. And I started to tell what I saw, and she told me not to tell it till after breakfast. So after breakfast, I told her about it. She said that it was her mama.
Mama, why was she asking you to wait until it after breakfast?
'Cause it was I guess, a superstition she had. I don't really know.
Okay.
But when I told her, she told me that it was her mama and that she had come to her too, and that she felt something warm from her feet all the way up to her face, and when she got to her face, she saw her mother's face, and her mother reached out and rubbed her forehead, and she was well, and she had been sick for over a week.
And so
And
she's convinced that was her mother.
her mother, and that she told me that she appeared to me, because children would perceive things like that more so than adults. So, but then there was a time when I had an uncle. He only had one arm, and it was real tough back then. Children were hungry, things like that. He went out and he bought a pair of gloves, and my grandpa fussed him out about it because he only had one hand, and children, he should have took that money and bought the children something to eat. But a little while after that, Uncle Willie died. My uncle died, and they were sitting there one night around the heater, and my grandpa was sitting in his rocking chair by the window, and he didn't see it. But my aunt and my grandmammy,
About how old would you have been about this time?
Real little, honey. I can't remember, but I was real little, probably 6, 7 years old, I guess.
Gotcha. I'm just trying to get a time frame. So this would have been the very late 40s, pushing early 50s then.
Probably, yeah.
Okay. All right.
And my grandmammy and my aunt was sitting there, and they heard a flutter like a bird, and then they saw this one hand, gloved hand, coming through the window to the back of my grandpa's neck. And they went screaming, and it went away. So, and I don't, so how did you explain that?
So he had been fussed at for buying a pair of gloves because of everything going on, and then lo and behold, a gloved hand comes through at him.
Yeah, and to the back of his neck. I don't know what would happen if he'd been in there by himself. The windows were all up because back then you didn't have screens, or we didn't have screens, and just put the windows up, So,
That's scary.
yeah, it is.
And you also had an experience out on a lake.
Yes, I was probably 12 or 13 years old. We went to this lake. I near about believe it was called Catherine's Lake. But anyway, we were all playing in the water and everything, and I looked across on the other side, and it looked like three great big inner tubes were in the water. But then it started moving some, and I hollered for everybody to start looking. And by the time they looked, it was already gone, and nobody didn't really believe me, but I know I saw it, and I remember it very well.
And you've never seen anything like that before or since?
No, never have.
Isn't there telling what you saw? But I did a little bit of research, and around that particular lake, there have been some other sightings of things. So it's very possible what you saw could have been seen by a lot of other people that day too.
Could be, yeah.
So thank you for sharing that with us. Just to move on a little bit and speaking about some of the other experiences that happened with the family, how about telling the story about the Indian woman?
All right. This Indian woman, and she had you know Indian clothes on like they wore a long, long time ago, or like we think they wore. She was beautiful, they said, and she would walk down this dirt road every day at a certain time. Nobody knew where she come from or where she went. So one day they decided to find out if she was real or not. And they put a string across the road when it was about time for her to come by. Well, when she come by, she went right on, down the road. And when she did, they checked the string and it weren't broke. So she went through the string. So
Did they ever see her again after that?
I don't really remember. I really don't.
And you said that had been going on for several nights?
Yeah, late in the evening, people be sitting out on their porches.
That's kind of scary. That's not anything I would want to run up on.
Me
And
either.
you said you also had another uncle that had some kind of run-in due to being out all night partying or something like that.
Yeah, my daddy and my uncle, or his uncle, he was my great uncle. Well, my uncle's wife died, and just after the funeral, just a few days later, my daddy and his uncle went out, and they drank a lot and went with other women and stuff. They come home and they went to lay down to rest, and there was a window right between both beds, and said that they heard sign of kind of a shuffle, and this woman in a long white gown and a hurricane lamp was standing there. And she walked between the beds towards the window and stopped and looked over at my daddy's uncle and just vanished through that window. And they said it looked exactly like my daddy's aunt.
So is that who they believe it is? So she had passed, I
Yeah.
guess.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how long did your great uncle stay sober?
I don't remember. He might have stayed sober, I believe.
That's interesting there. And so, and that made me think of another story, talking about a woman in a gown. Tell everybody about the story um, where somebody had asked you to marry you, but you'd had to have given me up, and you saw the man's ex-wife in a dream. You remember that?
Well,
You don't remember that?
yeah, yes, I do. Yes, I do. I know what you're talking about now. I lived in a trailer with this man, and he didn't love my child. He wanted me to give him up, and that was not going to take place. And one night I was there was three little shelves, and I had in there, and at the back, I was squatting down in front of those shelves, and I was dusting them off. And this wasn't a dream. I saw her. She, I heard something, and I knew it weren't my son because I had done put him to bed, and he was asleep. And I looked around, and there was a lady standing there in a yellow gown, and she looked at me and told me to leave him because he was not a good person. They say that she died she tried to commit suicide and it failed, so they had her in the hospital, and this man went to my ex went to see his wife, and that night she died. So I don't know if he had something to do with it or not, but she sure told me to leave him because he was not a good person. So later on, I asked a friend of hers, which was a friend of mine too, what did the girl have on when she passed away, when they put her to rest? She had on a gown,
Mm.
and yeah, I saw that, and I left. That was it. I didn't want nothing else to do with him. I wasn't about to give up my child for him or anybody else. My child is the light of my life.
Well, did you explain to him that you'd seen his ex-wife?
Yeah, I did. But he said that I was dreaming. I wasn't a dreaming when I was awake.
Mm-hmm. That is that is that is crazy. So we talked about that. At this point in time, let's talk about something that happened. Well, it happened to both of us. So we're a little later in time. Let's talk about the footsteps and the door knocking over at the house that you used to live in.
Well, you could hear it sound like heavy footsteps, and on the roofs, and sometimes on the porch. And at night there would be a knocking on my door. And then one time the knocking was right at my window. I picked up my pistol and I went to the door and I opened it. Nothing, nobody could be
Ready to
seen.
shoot something, weren't you?
I would have, yeah, I'd have shot over their head or something. But it happened several
Not
times.
like you
And
shot somebody one time before, right?
eh, but anyway, that it still happened after that time, several times. I never knew what that was.
Well, I know you'd been telling me about that for a long time, and I remember I was spending the night with you, and I'd actually spent a couple of nights with you, and around that third or fourth night, I don't remember, being in the back bedroom, I distinctly heard somebody walk up on the steps, and it sounded like they were wearing work boots, and they sounded heavy, like a big person.
Yeah,
And I kind of glanced out the window, and there's nothing there.
yeah,
And I never heard anybody knock on the windows or on the door, but I definitely heard that, and that was it was crystal clear. I mean, it's like just like somebody walking right up to your door.
Yeah,
It was scary.
it was.
Um, very scary.
I
And
slept with my pistol under my pillow.
I reckon you did. And Lisa, you remember this because this is in one of our old houses. You remember we started hearing things here and there, and you remember what Lexi used to do
Oh, yeah. She used to go to the hallway and just stand and stare.
for 5, 10 minutes at a
Yeah.
time, and
Oh, yeah.
we all heard sound like somebody walking around in the attic. I heard it. You guys remember that?
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
I
Yeah.
remember.
And just to there's just this eerie thing. Sometimes you could just walk in and you could feel like it's somebody here, and you knew that wasn't the
Mm-hmm.
case.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
So glad to be away from there. So,
I am
Oh,
too.
yes.
and Mama, we've got one more supernatural story to talk about, and we'll get to that in a minute. But before we get to that, let's let's talk about with keeping as many people safe as you can, and not telling any names. Um, you can tell places if you want, but let's don't drop any names. Talk about some of the crimes that our family has an association with.
Oh, please don't talk about
Well, back
you and
part.
don't incriminate yourself.
All right, try not to. Too old to get locked up. But the first thing I can remember, me and my brother and my first cousin, were young'uns, and we would play in the woods and everything. And one day we happened to see, looked like fresh dirt, where like a grave or something. Being a young'un, we wanted to dig it up, see if there was anybody in it. It was a motorcycle,
Naturally, yeah.
and it was a motorcycle. My cousin had stole it and driven it from Texas back to North Carolina and buried it out there.
Oh,
And
wow.
we went to telling everybody about it. Next thing I know, the law come there and locked him up. We didn't know he was going to get locked up.
Well, there's got to be a reason he would have buried the
I
motorcycle.
know, but we didn't know. Then two of my older brothers, uh, and my cousin, one time, well, me and my little brother and my cousin, we were under the house that was kind of high up off the ground, and we were playing doodle bug, come get your bread and butter. Well, we happened to look up under the eaves of the house, and boy, it was just flooded with tater chips and nabs and candy and cigarettes and everything. We thought we had died and gone to heaven. And
Christmas come early.
yeah, we eat candy and stuff till we were about to bust, and um, smoked cigarettes. And they had robbed a store down the road there that we didn't know they had robbed. We had got some of that stuff and went down there at that store and tried to sell it to him because we didn't know, but he wouldn't buy it. So
Didn't
so
feel like buying his own stuff, huh?
no, but yeah, that little old store's still standing. Nobody runs it no more, but I think it's still there.
Mm, mm,
And
mm, mm. Now, talk a little bit about we can mention some things. So you've got a set of brothers
yeah,
who robbed a um, well-known department store.
Because they've
Uh,
been convicted and done their time for it.
yeah, that's right. And so they were known as the Untouchables.
that's what they called herself.
And how many places did they rob?
Oh God, I don't remember. I know one of my older brothers said that would he would love to have so much money he couldn't carry it all. Well, that night they robbed that safe. He was just that he couldn't carry it all. He had to leave some nickels and quarters and dimes and pennies in the wood somewhere, 'cause they had so much other money they had to drag out of there. And
Did they recover? Did they recover that?
I don't know if they went back and got it or not.
How did they start living?
Well, they were kind of wild, you know. Early
Did
on,
they?
when one of my
Did they?
brothers was only 16 years old, my cousin cut his throat, and
Oh my God.
but he they got him to the hospital, and he was okay. And
And why did he cut his throat?
well, I heard that my grandmammy was mad with my mama over something, and
And you'd have
uh
been about 7 about this time, right?
I was about around between 5 and 7,
Okay.
and but my grandmammy didn't like my mama 'cause she only had one boy, and there weren't no woman good enough for her boy, and she put my cousin up to cutting my brother's throat, and she sharpened the knife for him, and the doctor said if my cousin had been a little bit taller, he'd have never made it to the hospital, but he liked just a little bit from his main artery there. But
Hmm.
he got all right. But they kind of
And that's
hmm.
that's because he couldn't stand upright due to a birth defect. And if he could have been standing upright, he probably would have got him. Is that what you're saying?
No, it weren't a birth defect. 'Cause back then he didn't have that rheumatoid arthritis. He was just shorter than Carson.
Okay. All right. Because they were children.
Yeah. Well, my brother was 16. I don't remember how old my cousin was.
And I know that we've got a relative who has told stories as well about your brother, about her being in the floorboard while he goes inside and commits armed robbery at gas stations.
Yeah, he went in to rob this man one time, and the man pulled a shotgun on him, and he run, and the man shot, and all the bullets that didn't go to him. He had on a leather jacket, and that helped it, some. And he wouldn't go to the hospital because he didn't want to tell him he was robbing a store. So he got back to the place where he lived, and his friend down the road there picked the bullets out of his back with a pocket knife.
Mm.
And yeah, they robbed a lot of places. They went way up they went to Maine, all up that way, different states, and robbed. I mean,
Mm-mm.
and one time they said that one of my brothers killed two old people, uh, and got all their money and buried
Mm-hmm.
them in the snow. And
Mm.
yeah, they pulled time in prison. And one time, they were really after one of my brothers real hard, and there was a old detective back then that everybody hated. He come to my grandmammy's house. She come out with her shotgun, and he asked her was my brother there. She's told him there weren't no fugitives in her house. And if he wanted to live, he better get off her porch. So he got off her
So she
porch.
didn't say there's no criminals. There ain't no fugitives here.
No fugitives. That's what she said.
That's because the fugitive was probably playing on TV around that time.
It could have been. It could have been. There ain't no telling. Well, we didn't have no TV, no telephone. Had one light in the
Well,
house, and it was in the kitchen. No, there was one in the living room, one in the kitchen.
so you talked about your brother who may or may not have been involved in a homicide. But don't you have two sisters who may or may not have been involved in a homicide as well, down at a certain part of town that's run down?
I don't remember that right now.
So,
But one of my brothers was driving one night. He was drunk, and a patrolman stopped him and asked him to get out of the car. He did. And he knew he was
mm,
drunk. He handcuffed him. And because my brother done what he said, and he handcuffed him. And then he beat my brother. That patrolman beat my brother right down on the highway, and he had a glass eye, and he knocked his eye out,
mm,
and still took him to jail. And later on, I don't know exactly how long, they found that cop behind this, I won't name his name, but it was behind this place down by a river. They,
and that's the place I was talking about too. About one of your sisters might have had something to do with somebody down by the river.
I can't remember.
It's possible that she was seen with a bloody. Well, the story is that she may have helped
Kill
unalive
somebody.
somebody.
Huh?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. I just gotta
yeah.
be careful. You gotta be
Yeah.
careful what we say.
Okay.
Do you remember it now?
But anyway, let me finish one about my brother, that patrolman.
Okay. Okay.
A while later on, they found that patrolman
Uh-huh.
washed up out of that river he was handcuffed and beat real bad. And they never did find who done it.
Wow.
But yeah,
Where?
I had another sister. She was kind of wild too, and she was down at that place, same place by the river one time. They were prostitutes down there, gambling, all kind of stuff. And she had this boyfriend, and he was mean too, and they robbed a lot of places, all over everywhere, different states. But anyway, she come to my other sister's house late one night, and her clothes just about tore off of her, and she said, I killed somebody.
Mm.
And I knew, when she told me who it was, I knew who she was talking about. But then when it come out, they said that my sister's boyfriend done it,
Mm-hmm.
and he pulled time for it, and she never did. So I don't know if it was her or the boyfriend.
Or maybe he could have just took the fall for her.
He could have, yeah. Yeah, he
Mm-mm-mm.
beat her with a pistol one night, hit her over the head with it, blood all over the roof of the car. I had a real good child upbringing, sounds like, don't it?
Well, are you comfortable talking about some of your criminal experiences?
Me?
Yeah, with a certain mobster who may or may not have been in the mafia in town.
I don't know exactly which one you mean. I know who you're talking about.
The one that comes to mind for me is when the two guys carrying guns run in the front of the diner while he runs out the back of the diner and leaves you holding some money.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It was two guys. Right before them two guys came in the diner, he come running up there and put the envelope down in my bosom, and he said, "Hold this for me." I asked him what it was. He said, "Nothing, just hold it." So he went back to the pool room, and but just a few minutes later, these two guys, they had on long black coats and briefcases, walked back there. And they stayed for a right good while. He had a safe and everything back there. I don't know if they done checked that. I don't know what they did. But a few minutes later, they come back and they left, and he come back up there and got the envelope out my bosom. Come to find out, it was like $38,000. I said, I wish I'd have known it. I'd left too with it. But
You wouldn't have done that, would you?
yeah, I would have back then.
Uh,
I wrote checks on him and moved to Texas. He went around and picked up all the checks that I had wrote on him.
and talk a little bit about the hit that got took out on you.
Oh yeah, yeah. This man's son knew his daddy was having an affair with me, and this man came to the man I was having an affair with and told him that his son had took out a hit on me, and he told him if anything happened to me, he would be a dead man. So I'm still here. But yeah, his son hated me, and I can't blame him now. Back then, I didn't care, and yeah, it was kind of rough back then. One night, me and my niece was at the window singing, and a brick comes flying through the window. Seemed like that boy followed me everywhere I went.
He was keeping tabs on you.
Yeah, he was going to try to kill me, I believe.
Who?
Hmm?
Which one? Not, what's his name? The other one.
The hitman.
Oh, the hitman. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
No, his son
Oh,
is
his
the one.
his son.
Yeah, his son, the one throwed the
He
brick
threw the
through the
brick.
window,
Okay.
and I don't know
And
how my friend threatened his son. I guess he finally left me alone. That lasted a right good while.
yeah, years.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah.
Mama, before we wind this up, is because we still got that one story to tell. I hadn't forgot it. Is there anything else you want to share?
Yeah, I'd like to share about when my baby was born. He was born too early. He only weighed 3 pounds and 1 ounce. And they wouldn't let me hold him or anything because they had to get him into that isolate, you know. And back then they didn't have the breathing machines and stuff like they got now for premature babies. They put me to sleep after I had him, and when I woke up, I was going down the hall. God, they told me not to get up because back then you'd stay in the hospital for 5 days or more after you had a baby. But anyway, I got up and I had started down the hall, holding on to the wall because I wanted to see my baby and see if he was in that isolate they told me they were going to put him in. The nurse saw me, and I happened to know that one. She asked me, so what in the world are you doing? I said, I'm going to see my baby. Is he alive? Is he there? She said, yes, he is, but you can't go. I said, I'm going. She said, well, can you wait here and let me get a wheelchair? So she did. She got me a wheelchair and she wheeled me down to the nursery and she opened it enough where I could see my little boy. And back then, I knew there was a God, but I didn't have no relationship with him like I have now, because I didn't know about him. Didn't grow up that way. And I was looking at my baby, and he was sleeping, and he was breathing, and I said, God, please let my baby live. And right now, as I say it, I can almost feel that presence again. It was almost like somebody put a warm blanket around my shoulders and just kind of hugged me. And I looked all around thinking it might be one of the nurses had put a warm blanket over me. Nobody was there, and there was no blanket. But from that moment on, nobody could tell me my baby wouldn't live. No, sir. I had all the faith in the world, and he did. And thank God he's here. I thank God for him every day of my life. He's my blessing.
Well, thank you, Mama. I appreciate that. I love you.
I love you too, baby.
Well, we forgot one story.
What's
Going
that?
back through my notes, we have forgotten the barn. We
Oh,
didn't talk about the barn.
oh, okay. It was a old-timey pack house, and my son was out playing in the yard, and me and my mother-in-law were in there taking off biker, and she had to go somewhere, and they told us not to smoke in there, I guess 'cause all that dry biker. But anyhow, she had to go to the store or somewhere she had to go, but she left. So I lit me a cigarette in the barn, still taking off biker, and all of a sudden the wind started kind of blowing in that barn. And I mean, there weren't even no wind outside. And some of the biker on the floor, was kind of windy looking. And I looked up and off in the corner of that barn, there was this white looking mist like in the shape of somebody. And I come out of that barn,
I would have too.
got my young'un and sat down out there on the grass, and I wouldn't go back in there till she got back. I told her about it. She said, well, maybe it was the old man that used to own that farm had died. Maybe it was him telling me not to smoke that cigarette in there with that dry biker.
It could have been.
It could have been, but I'll tell you what, it was scary. It really was.
It is scary. It really is. Well, Mama, we're going to wind everything up now, so you'll hear a click here in just a second. But thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Lisa, anything you want to add before we close it down?
No, just everybody have a Merry Christmas
You
and
want
a
me to tell you
Happy New
about?
Year.
You want me to tell you about the time that I shot somebody?
Let's save that for another
For
time.
another time.
Okay. All right. Merry Christmas.